My name is Ethan Walker, and for 7 years, I was the most loyal employee at Hayes Tech Solutions, a mid-sized software company in Dallas, Texas. I was the guy who came in early, left late, and never took a vacation longer than a weekend. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just believed in the company, believed in my team, believed in the mission. Each morning, I'd arrive by 7:30 a.m., always with a black coffee from Ellie's Diner, 2 blocks from the office. My desk, always spotless, was tucked in the corner of the tech floor, right beneath the oversized window that faced Elm Street. I liked the corner. I could see everything and everyone. I thrived on structure. My job as lead product developer was demanding, but I loved every second of it. My colleagues respected me, even if they didn't always understand my quiet intensity. Rachel Cooper, our UX designer and my closest work ally, used to tease me. "Ethan, one of these days you'll get a life outside of GitHub and system diagnostics." I'd just laugh, sipping my coffee. Truth was, work was my life, and I didn't mind. I wasn't flashy. I didn't dress like the startup crowd with their hoodies and sneakers. My wardrobe was pressed button-downs and slacks, mostly in muted blues and grays. My apartment was modest, a one-bedroom downtown, but I didn't need more. I was saving. Not just money, but dreams. I wanted to one day run my own firm. I had ideas, notebooks full of them. But loyalty held me back. Hayes Tech had given me a start, and I wasn't going to abandon it. Or so I thought. Mr. Donald Hayes, the CEO, was someone I respected until I didn't. He was a polished man, always with a firm handshake and a half-smile that never quite reached his eyes. He spoke in slogans, "Innovation with integrity, we rise together." I believed them once. Now I know better. My first hint that things weren't as secure as they seemed came on a rainy Thursday in March. It was subtle. I was called into a meeting with Mike Benson, the new head of operations. Mike had joined 2 months earlier from some corporate giant on the East Coast. Slick guy, gelled hair, flashy Rolex, and a fake charm that felt like sugar poured over poison. The meeting was odd. He didn't talk about products or roadmaps. He asked me about my hours, about how I managed the team. At first, I thought it was just an introductory conversation. But something about the way he smiled, a little too long, a little too wide, set me on edge. "Ethan," he said, tapping his pen on a folder with my name on it, "do you ever feel overwhelmed?" "No more than usual," I replied, a half-joke, trying to gauge him. He chuckled. "Just want to make sure you're not burning out. You're a valuable asset." That phrase, valuable asset, felt clinical, cold, like I was already being evaluated for removal. That night, I stayed later than usual, combing through my recent project reports. Everything was spotless. Deliverables on time. Bug reports clean. Team metrics strong. So, why did I feel like I was being watched? In the days that followed, things grew stranger. Emails started disappearing from my inbox. Meetings I was supposed to lead were suddenly canceled or reassigned. Rachel noticed it too. "Did they loop you out of the sprint review?" she asked, frowning. "That's weird. You're the product lead." I shrugged, trying to laugh it off. Maybe Mike's just reorganizing things. But my gut told me different. A week later, my key card didn't work on a Monday morning. I stood there, in the drizzling rain, swiping it 3 times before the security guard let me in manually. "Probably a glitch," he said, smiling sympathetically. "Probably." But it didn't feel like a glitch. It felt like a message. I kept pushing it aside. Told myself I was paranoid. Told myself that after 7 years of loyalty, there's no way they'd just cut me loose without cause. But that's exactly what they did. 3 weeks after that strange meeting with Mike, I was called into a conference room. It was sterile, windowless. I knew immediately. This wasn't a meeting. This was a firing. Rachel tried to stop me. "Wait. Why are they calling you in? You didn't even get an invite." I just smiled at her, that fake, heavy kind of smile. "It's nothing. Probably just a quick update." I walked in. Donald Hayes and Mike Benson were already seated. They didn't even offer me coffee. "Ethan," Hayes began, his voice thick with rehearsed empathy, "this isn't easy." Mike was silent, hands folded on the table like a smug chess player who already knows he's won. "We've decided to restructure the department," Hayes continued. "And unfortunately, your role is being dissolved." "Dissolved," I repeated, stunned. "Effective immediately," Mike added, his voice smooth as glass. My ears rang. My vision blurred. I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
But why?
"I've hit every benchmark. My last product release increased retention by 23%. "We appreciate your contributions," Hayes said, cutting me off. "This is purely a strategic decision." I opened my mouth to speak again, but something stopped me. That look on Mike's face.
Smug.
Like this was personal. Like he'd been waiting for this. I walked out of that building with a cardboard box and a storm inside me. Outside, the clouds had broken, sunlight streaming through like nothing had happened. But something had. And I knew, in that moment, that I would not just get even. I would burn the ground they stood on, and build my own kingdom on the ashes. The Monday after I was fired, I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the box of office supplies I had dropped on the counter the night before. Inside were fragments of a life I had built, my mug from the company retreat, a framed photo of my team at the last product launch, a USB drive, my old notebooks. All of it now felt like evidence from a crime scene. I replayed the termination meeting over and over again in my head. Something didn't add up. I wasn't some underperformer they had to let go in a budget cut. I was their lead innovator, the architect of their last 2 successful platforms. So why me? My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Rachel Cooper, 8:23 a.m. "Ethan, I just heard."
I'm so sorry.
"This is insane. Are you okay?" I didn't answer right away. What could I say? That I felt hollow? That my brain wouldn't stop spinning? Instead, I typed, "Thanks. It doesn't feel real yet." Then I added, "I think something else is going on. Doesn't make sense." She called 5 minutes later. "You're right," she said without waiting for me to speak. "Mike's been acting weird." I overheard him on a call with someone named Carla Bennett. She's from Greens Park Ventures. You know them? Greens Park. The name hit me like ice down the spine. They were a private equity firm, ruthless, aggressive, and known for hostile takeovers. I'd heard rumors they were circling Hayes Tech, but Donald had always insisted those talks were over. Why would Benson be talking to Greens Park? I asked. "I don't know," Rachel replied. "But I found something else." She sent me an internal memo. It was titled, Phase 1, Departmental Optimization Strategy. The kicker? It was dated 2 weeks before I was fired. My name was mentioned. Alongside it, the phrase, "Position slated for removal due to redundancy." Redundancy. I had created the systems they used every day. I wasn't redundant. I was in the way. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. "Rachel," I said quietly, "I think they needed me gone before the buyout." She hesitated. "Why?" "Because I own something they don't." And that's when it clicked. In one of my personal notebooks, sitting in that very box on the counter, I had sketches and frameworks for an algorithm. Something I had been refining on the side for years. I called it PulseStream, a machine learning engine for optimizing cloud resources in real time. It could reduce server costs by 30% or more, and it was unlike anything currently on the market. I'd never shared it, not even with Rachel. But I had demoed an early version of the concept during a quarterly innovation day at Hayes Tech 6 months ago. Mike had been in the room. Suddenly, it all aligned. They didn't fire me because I was failing. They fired me because they were planning to steal my work, push the buyout through, and sell PulseStream as part of the company's assets. And I had just handed over my USB drive with all my early development notes. I jumped up and ran to the counter, dug through the box. The drive was missing. I tore through everything again, books, cables, even shook out my jacket pockets.
Gone.
I texted Rachel immediately. "They took my USB. I think they're planning to use PulseStream in the buyout." She didn't reply right away. When she finally did, her message was brief. "I think I know someone who can help. He used to work in audit." The next morning, I met Marcus Lee. Marcus was a former internal auditor who had worked at Hayes Tech 2 years ago before abruptly quitting after a disagreement with management. He now worked freelance, mostly for whistleblower cases and corporate defense.
We met at a coffee shop downtown.
Marcus was in his early 40s, wore a weathered leather jacket, and carried himself like someone who'd seen every kind of boardroom betrayal there was. Rachel introduced us, then quietly slipped away, not wanting to raise suspicion at work. Marcus leaned back in his seat, swirling his coffee. "So, you think your IP was stolen in anticipation of a buyout?" "I don't think." "I know," I replied.
He tapped the table.
"Then the first step is finding out exactly what's in the Greens Park proposal. If your algorithm is mentioned, even indirectly, we might be able to nail them for IP theft."
How?
"You didn't sign any NDA for Pullstream, right?"
No.
"I kept it personal."
Good.
"But we need proof that they're using it." He slid a thumb drive across the table. "This will help. It's an internal network probe. If your contact inside can install it on any of the Hayes Tech machines, it'll mirror outgoing documents, especially anything going to Greens Park." "Rachel could do it," I said, hesitating. "But I don't want her getting caught. Then we keep her in the dark. You only tell her what she needs to know." I nodded. We had a plan. That night, I met Rachel in her car in the parking garage beneath her apartment. The tension between us was palpable. She looked around nervously before speaking. "This feels risky." "It is," I admitted. "But they took everything from me. I'm not just walking away." She nodded, then held out her hand. "Give me the drive." 3 days passed in silence. I barely slept. I kept checking my phone, waiting for news. Then, finally, a message from Marcus. "Marcus Lee, 4:11 p.m. We got something. Meet me tonight. Bring Rachel." We met in the back booth of a dim Thai restaurant off Greenville Avenue. Marcus opened his laptop, turned it toward us, and played a screen recording. It was a scanned copy of a confidential proposal from Hayes Tech to Greens Park Ventures. The title? Project Zenith, Proprietary Optimization Engine Proposal. I stared at the diagram on page 2. There it was. Pullstream. Rebranded. Renamed. But still unmistakably mine. Even the flow logic matched my original sketches. Rachel covered her mouth. They didn't even change the architecture. I was shaking. "They're presenting this as part of the company's IP portfolio," Marcus said. "They've attached a valuation of nearly $18 million to it."
$18
million. And I wasn't getting a cent. I looked up. My voice was low, cold. "I'm going to destroy them." Marcus leaned in. "Then you'd better be ready to go nuclear." The night after Marcus showed us the proposal, I couldn't sleep. The walls of my apartment felt like they were closing in, as if betrayal was trapped in the drywall. I walked barefoot across the wooden floor, staring out the window while Dallas blinked under neon and darkness. $18 million. That's what Pullstream was worth, minimum. And I was never supposed to know. But now that I did, there was no turning back. Revenge was no longer a fantasy. It was a strategy. And it had to be perfect. The next morning, Marcus and I met at a quiet workspace he rented in Deep Ellum. It was a one-room setup with a whiteboard, 2 laptops, and stacks of documents that looked like they'd survived 100 courtroom battles. "We need leverage," he said without looking up. "Something that forces Greens Park and Hayes Tech to the table, under your terms." "I thought the IP theft was leverage," I said. Marcus nodded. "It is. But it's not enough to win. We need to scare them. We need to make them believe going public would cost them more than paying you what you're worth." He handed me a legal pad filled with scrawled ideas. Timelines. Company acquisitions. Legal angles. He wasn't just an auditor, he was a strategist with a killer instinct. I read through the plan. Step 1. Protect the IP. We had to legally register Pullstream under my name before they beat me to it. That meant documentation, timestamps, and a solid legal defense. Step 2. Leak the skeletons. If Hayes Tech and Greens Park wanted to play dirty, we had to show we could, too. Rachel's job was to quietly gather emails, contracts, and confidential memos, anything that pointed to internal corruption or misconduct. Step 3. Offer the deal. Once we had proof and protection, I'd present a direct threat. Either they pay me fair compensation or I blow it all up. I nodded slowly. We do this right. We don't just get even. We get rich. Marcus gave me a small smile. And we protect others who they've steamrolled. Registering Pulse wasn't easy. I had some early designs saved in emails to myself, dated sketches, and prototype code snippets. It took a week to gather everything. Marcus connected me with Tara Lopez, an aggressive IP attorney from Austin known for handling high-stakes tech cases. She was young, fierce, and talked like every sentence was a verdict. I sent her the files and sat across from her at a small law office surrounded by bookshelves and the scent of ink. "You've got a solid claim," she said, flipping through my documentation. "You never signed anything with Hayes Tech regarding this?" "Nope. It was my personal work. I pitched a prototype once, but nothing formal came of it." She glanced at the flowcharts. "Well, you just became the storm in their sunny little sky." She filed for a provisional patent that same day. Once it cleared, I'd officially be the legal owner of Pulse. While that moved forward, Rachel worked from the inside. Every day, she forwarded me sanitized, encrypted files, email chains, budget approvals, internal messaging logs. Then she found something big. I was sitting in Marcus's workspace, eyes bloodshot from scanning patent code, when my phone pinged. "Rachel Cooper, 11:43 p.m.
Ethan.
You need to see this." Attached was a PDF. It was an internal HR report, marked confidential. Inside were multiple complaints against Mike Benson, including workplace discrimination and fraudulent reporting of product metrics. I stared at the page, stunned. They covered all this up? Rachel replied immediately. "Rachel, 11:45 p.m. 3 employees filed complaints. All investigated and dismissed by Hayes. No outside counsel ever brought in." Marcus whistled when I showed him. "This is gold." "It's not just that he fired me unjustly," I said. "He was a liability, and they kept him because he made their buyout look better." Marcus leaned forward. "Then let's use that." We crafted a dossier, a digital warhead. Inside, proof that Pulse was my independent work. Documents showing they knowingly took it as part of the Greens Park proposal. HR cover-up files implicating Mike Benson. The full list of employees terminated or forced out prior to the acquisition timeline. Once assembled, Marcus gave it a name, Project Fallout. "Now," he said, "we just need an audience." Rachel reached out to a former Hayes Tech employee named James Harmon, a senior developer who left the company 2 years ago under strange circumstances. We met James at a small jazz bar off McKinney Avenue. He was tall, quiet, wore glasses, and walked with a limp. He looked like a man who had seen too much and trusted too little. "I heard you're planning something," he said as we sat. "We're making it right," I replied. He sipped his drink. "You know they blackballed me, right? After I filed a complaint about misappropriation of development credit, they sent out whisper campaigns. No one in Dallas would hire me." "I want to expose it all," I said.
"But I also want them to pay."
"For every person they stepped on." James looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hear someone say that." He handed me a USB drive. "This has internal chats between Mike and Donald. They talk about burying complaints, suppressing code authorship. There's even a mention of your project, something about extracting useful assets before the walkout." My skin went cold. "They knew," I muttered. "They always do," James said. Armed with everything we needed, I crafted the final stage, the offer. Marcus helped me draft a formal notice addressed to both Donald Hayes and Carla Bennett, the Greens Park executive leading the acquisition. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. "To whom it may concern." Attached are documents and legal filings showing ownership of the Pulse algorithm by Ethan Walker. Any further use, presentation, or negotiation involving this technology without direct approval from the owner constitutes IP theft. In addition, enclosed are files detailing covered-up HR violations, fraudulent reporting practices, and unethical asset absorption. You may choose to settle this matter privately by compensating Mr. Walker for his rightful contribution and IP. Or we may proceed with public legal action, press coverage, and investor disclosures. At the bottom, I attached a figure, $12 million. And beneath that, deadline for response, 7 days. The waiting was the hardest part. For 7 days, I lived in limbo. Every hour that passed, I imagined the email bouncing between lawyers, board members, crisis managers. On the 6th day, I received an encrypted reply from Carla Bennett. Mr. Walker, your claim has been reviewed. We are open to negotiating a resolution under confidentiality. Please provide your counsel's contact information. Marcus read it, then looked at me. You've got them scared. Tara Lopez took over the next steps. She arranged a closed-door arbitration. No media, no press, just terms, signatures, and silence. The offer came through. $10.2 million in direct payout. Official acknowledgement of my intellectual property. Greens Park would acquire Pullstream under new licensing with royalties. Hayes Tech would settle the discrimination cover-ups quietly, with Rachel and James both receiving compensation packages. Mike Benson resigned 2 days later. Rachel cried when I told her. Not because of the money, but because we'd actually done it. We didn't just get revenge. We changed the game. 3 months later, I moved into a new condo overlooking the city skyline. I founded Virion Labs, my own software firm, using Pullstream as the foundation. Within weeks, 3 companies approached me for partnership deals. Real ones. Fair ones. Rachel came on as creative director. James joined our dev team. Marcus remained my go-to consultant and part-time chaos specialist. I no longer needed to prove myself to people like Donald Hayes. Because now, they were all just footnotes in my story. 6 months after the settlement, life had shifted dramatically. From working late nights in a corner office I didn't own, to hosting investor calls from my penthouse study, my world had transformed. But the funny thing about revenge is, even after the war is won, the fire doesn't always go out. I had the payout. I had the legal victory. I had my company. But I didn't have peace. That came later, when the truth finally came out. One afternoon, I received an encrypted message from Marcus. No subject, just a link and a note. Thought you might want to see this before it airs. I clicked it. The video opened with the logo of Truthwire, a digital investigative news outlet. The title read, Inside Hayes Tech, Cover-Ups, Corruption, and the Real Reason Their Star Developer Disappeared. The reporter, Olivia Grant, a well-known tech journalist, appeared on screen. She began. In what appeared to be a quiet transition of leadership and innovation, our team has uncovered a far more sinister story behind the Hayes Tech, Greens Park acquisition. I leaned forward. She laid it all out. The secret meetings between Carla Bennett and Mike Benson. Internal memos from Hayes Tech that discuss suppressing harassment claims. Tampered product metrics to inflate the company's value. And the deliberate removal of one man, me, from the picture to steal Pullstream and sell it as their own. It was all there. She never mentioned my name, due to the confidentiality clause, but anyone who knew me or the industry would connect the dots. Then Olivia dropped the final blow. Sources confirm that shortly after the quiet departure of their lead developer, Hayes Tech attempted to repackage his proprietary technology into a new initiative dubbed Project Zenith. The move triggered legal backlash and forced private arbitration, reportedly resulting in a multi-million-dollar settlement. As of now, Hayes Tech's former COO Mike Benson has stepped away from the tech sector. Donald Hayes has declined comment. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding, watching the story unfold like a movie. Except this wasn't fiction. It was my life. And the world was finally seeing what had really happened. The fallout was immediate. Social media erupted. Hashtag Hayes Tech scandal trended for 2 days. Tech blogs and Twitter accounts speculated about who the developer was, what the stolen technology might be, and who had orchestrated the cover-up. Investors panicked. Greens Park issued a vague statement about reviewing internal procedures. And then I received another message. This time from Donald Hayes. A short email. Ethan, congratulations. You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth it.
DH.
I stared at the screen. Not anger. Not denial. Just defeat. But that wasn't the satisfying part. What came next was, 2 weeks after the expose, I was invited to speak on a panel at a national tech summit in San Francisco. Topic: Ethics and Innovation in the Age of AI. I almost declined, but Rachel convinced me to go. You built something real, Ethan. They tried to bury it. Now people are listening. You need to be the one to speak. And so, I stood on that stage under blinding lights, in front of a crowd of over 1,000 industry leaders, startup founders, and students. I told my story, edited, but honest. I spoke about betrayal, about being erased, about building something only to watch others try to claim it. I spoke about integrity, resilience, and revenge not as destruction, but as justice done with intelligence. And when I finished, the room rose in applause. Not for vengeance, for vindication. After the panel, I stood near the back of the conference hall, watching attendees pass by, when I heard a familiar voice. Never figured you for a stage guy. I turned. Carla Bennett stood before me, arms folded, expression unreadable. She looked smaller than I remembered, less in control. Didn't think I'd see you here, I replied. I had to show face. Green's Park's reputation took a hit, still trying to keep our remaining deals afloat. I waited. Then she said something I didn't expect. You were right. You beat us. I studied her for a moment. And, do you regret it? She didn't answer directly. Just said, you made your point. Loud and clear. Then she walked away. That was the last time I ever saw her. That night, in my hotel room overlooking the bay, I opened my laptop and watched the Truthwire interview again. Not out of vanity, but to let it sink in. I had started with nothing but a cardboard box, a stolen USB drive, and a storm in my chest. Now, the world knew. I wasn't the fired developer who disappeared. I was the man who took down a giant and built something even bigger in its place. 3 weeks after the tech summit, I was back in Dallas, sitting in the sunlit conference room of Virion Labs, my company. It had been renovated recently. Where once there had been bare walls and cheap folding desks, there were now glass partitions, whiteboards full of ideas, and the low hum of creative minds at work. I leaned back in the ergonomic chair, one I had picked out myself after sitting in cheap ones for years, and looked around at the team I had built. Rachel Cooper, now my Chief Experience Officer, was leading a UI/UX review with the design team. James Harmon was across the floor, helping onboard a group of interns. The same man who had once been blacklisted was now mentoring the next generation of developers. And Marcus Lee? Well, he still wasn't officially on payroll. But he had his own corner space, nicknamed the Chaos Desk, where he consulted for us when things got sticky. I'd made something real. But the most surprising part wasn't the company. It was who I had become. There's something strange about revenge. When it starts, it consumes everything. Every thought, every breath. It's fire in your veins, obsession in your gut. But after, there's silence. Not empty, just quiet. Because once the storm passes, you realize the real work was never burning it down. The real work is building something better in its place. After the expose, Hayes Tech was never the same. Green's Park pulled out of the acquisition. Donald Hayes resigned quietly under personal reasons. Mike Benson? He reappeared briefly in a smaller firm out of state, but his reputation never recovered. I'd won. But I had no interest in gloating. I didn't need to, because life had finally started moving forward. One Friday afternoon, as we wrapped up a major client onboarding, Rachel knocked on my door. You've got a visitor, she said with a smile. He says you don't know him, but he definitely knows you. I raised an eyebrow. What's his name? Noah Reed. The name didn't ring a bell. Rachel opened the door wider, and in walked a young man, early 20s, sharp but a little nervous, holding a small notebook in one hand. Mr. Walker, he said. Ethan, I corrected. Come in. He sat across from me, cleared his throat, and said, "I just wanted to thank you. I read the Truthwire story. I know they didn't use your name, but I recognize the code framework from an open-source version you released 5 years ago. That was yours, right?" I nodded slowly. "I'm building a data startup," he continued, "and I was just about to sign a deal with a firm backed by GreensPark until I saw what they did to you. I pulled out, and now I'm bootstrapping with 2 of my friends instead." I smiled. "Good. That's brave." He hesitated, then said something that caught me off guard. "You showed me that it's possible to win without becoming like them." I stared at him for a long moment. That line hit hard, because I had come close. There were nights when the anger threatened to devour everything, when I wanted to break rules, to leak documents, to torch reputations just for the satisfaction of it. But I hadn't. I'd fought strategically, ethically, and that mattered. To others. And to myself. After Noah left, I found myself sitting at my desk, looking at a small framed photo I kept near the monitor. It was from 5 years ago. A picture of me and my old team at Hayes Tech. We were smiling, laughing, caught in a moment when we still believed the company cared. It didn't anymore. Maybe it never did. But I wasn't bitter. Because from that toxic soil, I had grown something alive. Later that month, I received a letter from Tara Lopez, my IP attorney. It wasn't legalese this time. It was personal. "Ethan, we've handled a dozen cases since yours. And I still talk about you in meetings. Not because you won big, but because you reminded me what it means to protect something real. I know we signed a confidentiality clause, but I want you to know your impact has rippled through our world.
Keep building.
And if anyone tries to steal again, you know who to call. Tara." I smiled as I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. The story had moved on, but its echoes were still traveling. 6 months passed, then a year, and with time came clarity. The people who had once dismissed me, forgotten. The ones who believed in me, still here. Virion Labs expanded to 3 offices, Dallas, Austin, and Denver. We were featured in Forbes Tech Under 40. Pulsestream, now in its 5th version, was integrated into over 200 platforms worldwide. But my proudest moment? Not the money, not the fame. It was watching one of our interns, Maya, 19 years old, present her first product prototype during a company all-hands. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. She beamed, eyes lit with purpose. I saw myself in her. The version of me that once walked into Hayes Tech full of dreams. And this time I knew no one would silence her. Not on my watch. That night, I took the long way home. Drove past the old Hayes Tech building. It was darker now. Smaller than I remembered. The parking lot half empty. As I stopped at the red light across from it, I rolled the window down and let the wind rush in. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel triumphant. I just felt free. The light turned green, and I drove on.